Greetings. My name is Richard Sommer, and I'm a professor of architecture and urbanism and the former dean of the Daniels faculty. I'm here to talk about books and reading. First, let me say that what I read and the way I read has changed a lot over time. The first books that really affected me were by early 20th century Swiss German novelists like Thomas Mann and Hermann Hesse. So just like the music we listen to when we're coming of age affects our musical tastes almost forever, these books influence the kind of writers, artists, and architects I was drawn to later. For example, in my case, the author W.G. Siebold or the architect Adolf Loos. One of the authors I was most affected by is a relatively obscure contemporary of Mann and Hesse, Robert Walser. His novel, Jacob von Guten, is about a young man from a relatively privileged background who leaves home and decides to dedicate his life to serving others. So he enrolls in this surreal Institut for the trained servants. I read this book during a point in my development as an architect when I had all sorts of ambitions. So this story about a person choosing humility and to almost disappear really struck a chord. Today, I actually do a lot of my reading on digital devices. For example, I read the online journal Places. But even so, I like to collect books, especially if they're somehow beautiful to hold and to look at. And as you can see, I keep many of my books around me, like old and new friends. So this is one of my favorites on the artist and designer Moholy-Nagy. It has a beautiful plastic cover. I actually read a lot less about architecture now than I once did. And in terms of my development as an architect and urbanist, many of the books that transformed my thinking over the years were not strictly speaking about architecture. A few of these books would include on the subject of cities, Marshall Berman's All That's Solid Melts into Air, on the geometries and patterns that link certain modern and classical works of architecture, Colin Rowe's Mathematics of the Ideal Villa, on the relation between aesthetics, politics, and consciousness, the collected essays of Walter Benjamin in Reflections, on problems of race, class, and Black emancipation, the essays by W.E.B. Du Bois collected in Darkwater, on the deep time and shifting scales of the landscape, John McPhee's Annals of the Modern World, on the digital city, Shannon Mattern's The City is Not a Computer, Other Urban Intelligences, on the colonization of consciousness, Jonathan Crary's 24/7, Late Capitalism and the Ends of Sleep. And I'm hoping Daniel Allen's just published book, Justice by Means of Democracy, might be one of these books too. To be honest, I wish I had the time and focus I was able to devote to reading that I did when I was a student. I know we're all somehow distracted today, but as hard as you might find it, I recommend that you take full advantage of the time you have now to read as much and as intensely as possible. Thanks for listening, and I hope to see you at school.